the most anticipated books of 2024, including new releases and books that I am just anticipating reading. Many of these books are actually recommendations from you guys. As always, what is on here for you? What books maybe you've never heard of that you think, oh wow, this is a great book. This is something that I totally would want to read. What are books that maybe you've heard of but forgotten about, that now that you're reminded in this video, you're like, oh, I gotta read that book. So let's get started with some actual new releases. Even though I don't personally read that many new releases, of course, sometimes I do read some. And I would say one book that I'm very much looking forward to is The Women by Kristen Hanna. Now, Kristen Hanna, she's a very, very popular historical fiction writer. I really loved her book, The Nightingale. That was a World War II book. This book, The Women, is a book about the Vietnam War. It's about a woman, a nurse, who basically goes to help with the Vietnam War, and then she sort of gets like disillusioned, or so I've heard. Now, the one thing about Kristen Hanna books, you never know, is it going to be like The Nightingale, which is, in my opinion, is unique in her repertoire. Her other books tend to be more like soap operas, more like everything bad that could possibly happen is going to happen. I mean, not that there isn't a place for that, not that I don't enjoy a good soap opera, it's just that, you know, I'm curious going into it, what kind of book is this going to be like? And I am actually planning on going to a book tour event for this book, so subscribe to this channel if you're interested in seeing how that goes. Now, the next new release that I'm very much looking forward to is The Phoenix Crown by Kate Quinn and Jenny Chang. Or excuse me, Janie Chang. Now this is interesting to me because Kate Quinn, I've actually never read one of her books, but she's very popular. So I'm curious to read that. And then I am curious because it is a book with two different authors. So I'm curious about that. But it essentially takes place in San Francisco in 1906. There are two women coming from very different backgrounds and their lives get intertwined because of their relationship to a railroad magnate. There's a priceless Chinese artifact, you know, mixed up in there somewhere. So it just sounds, you know, like a good, fun Kate Quinn book. I know she's very popular. I've never read her before, so I'm very much looking forward to this. Now, another new release that I'm very much looking forward to is The Great Divide by Cristina Enriquez. Now, the reason why I'm looking forward to it is because it's about a place in history and a period of history that I don't really know much about, so I'm always interested in learning about things I don't know anything about. It's essentially about the intertwining lives of about a dozen characters, and it all surrounds the building of the Panama Canal. So I just thought, you know, this sounds right up my alley in terms of historical fiction, and I always like to try to learn about different periods of history and different places that I don't know anything about. So now let's go into the totally opposite direction. I was talking about new releases. Now let's talk about classics. So I love classics. If you ever watched my channel, you'll know that I absolutely love classics, and I make it a point to read classics that I've never read. I did reread The Count of Monte Cristo last year, and I loved it. And so because I am going to Paris this summer with my family, with my husband and kids, and my sister and her two kids and her husband, I thought, you know, if I'm going for French epics, why don't I just go with the ultimate, right? Les Miserables. And actually, one of my good friends who read The Count of Monte Cristo with me, she's sort of pushing me into reading this. She just got it. She just started it. So I'm going to start it as well. And, you know, it's got almost 1 million reviews on Goodreads. I don't know reviews, but 1 million stars on Goodreads, and it has over 4. So, you know, it's considered one of the greatest classics of all time. So, you know, I might as well just give it a go. And since we are talking about classics, this is another classic that I personally am highly anticipating this year to read, is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I've actually never read it. Of course, I've seen the movie many times. I actually loved that movie as a kid. So obviously some very heavy, you know, things that movie was dealing with, and I watched it as a kid and I loved it. So, you know, I thought, you know what, I gotta finally actually read this book. The next book, Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. Now, I've seen this book on so many different lists of, you know, the best books of that year or best historical fiction, and actually somebody on this channel commented and said that that was one of her favorite reads of 2023. So I actually got reminded of that book by that comment, and that is a book that I'm very much looking forward to reading. It is a historical fiction book. It's about a woman in Korea who gets involved with a wealthy man. She finds out that she's pregnant, and then she sort of says, you know, I didn't realize that you were married, so I'm not gonna, you know, go with you and do what you want, and then sort of like the reverberations of that throughout time. But I've heard a lot of great things about this book, so I'm very much looking forward to reading that. The next book that I'm looking forward to is The Echo of Old Books by Barbara Davis. Now, this is another one that's gotten a lot of hype.
Oh, wait. I did not actually know this when I was recording this video, but this is actually a new release set to come out in late March. This book has already gotten a ton of hype on the internet. So subscribe to this channel to see if it's worth the hype, because I've already used my Audible credit to buy it.
I saw this, somebody on Instagram that I follow recommended it. It's a book within a book. I guess the main character, Ashlyn Greer, whenever she gets a book, she can basically touch the book and understand its backstory, understand the energy that's within it. I guess the way it's described is like the emotional fingerprint of the book that only she can understand. Well, then she finds these two books. For some reason, they've never been published. They basically are two different sides of a tragic romance. It's a literary mystery. So because this book has gotten so much hype and because it just sounds right up my alley, I thought, you know what? I've really got to read this one. The next book is The Secret Book of Flora Lee by Patty Callahan Henry. Now this is another one that I've heard recommended by a lot of different people, and actually somebody on this YouTube channel recommended it as one of her favorite books that she read last year. So because I just got reminded of it over and over again, I thought, you know what, I've really got to put this one on my list. This one I'm very much looking forward to. It's on hold on my library, but it's got months wait, so I don't know when I'll get to it. But again, this is another sort of like book within a book. It's about a woman who, because of World War II, she's in England and she has to go with her sister to live in the countryside, and then her sister disappears. But she used to tell her sister these stories about this magical fairyland, and then later on in her life, she gets this mysterious book, this mysterious package, and the name of the book is this. Let me see, what is it? Whisperwood and the River of Stars. And basically, it's the story that she used to tell to her sister. And so then she starts wondering, like, did my sister really disappear? Like, what's happening? And this book has gotten so many good reviews, and so many people have recommended it to me, and I've just seen it in so many different places that I finally decided, you know what? I feel like this one could be worth the hype. I gotta try it. But subscribe to this channel to see what I think of it, because I always give honest reviews, and I always give reviews in a way that, just because I like something or I don't like something, that doesn't mean you won't, right? Like, we all have our own taste. So I'll tell you about the book in terms of what type of book it is. Was it a slow burn book? Was it really fast paced? Does it have great characters? So like, is this the type of book that would work for you? Another one that I've sort of had on my radar for a while, and I'm going to read it out because the name of the author is a little bit difficult for me. It's The Blue Sky by Gausen Shinag. I don't know if I said it right, but essentially it is a memoir, essentially, from a man who is part of the Tuvan tribe in Mongolia. And it's basically just the story about his life and the story about the clash of his tribe and its ancient traditions and modernity, essentially. And I've seen this book over the course of the last year many times. I don't know why it sort of popped up on my radar, but it definitely is something that I'm interested in, and it's definitely something I'm gonna read. So it's less historical fiction and more just memoir, but it's about a part of the world that, I truly don't know anything about. And also, I believe the author of this book is the first member of his tribe ever to tell a story in the written word. And then on a totally different note, I definitely this year want to finish the Harry Potter. I've got the number 6 and number 7. I've got to finish Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and then Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. And then another book that's totally not historical fiction in any way. It's just The Way of Integrity, Finding the Path to Your True Self by Martha Beck. Now, Martha Beck's somebody, she's just, kind of like a self-help person. I tend to read, some self-help. I tend to like to do it, especially early in the morning, sort of, get my mind right for the day. I really liked Martha Beck's book, Finding Your Way in a Wild New World. I just think that she has a really refreshing way to just think about the world and think about your place in it. So this is her new book. I think it's a couple years old, but, I follow her on Instagram. I like what she has to say. I'm just looking forward to reading, sort of like her new philosophy, essentially. Now, 2 more historical fiction books. They are actually reserved at the library right now. I just got an email that said that these books are both ready for me to read, so I'm going to be reading them very soon. And that is The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert and 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. Now, I loved The Kite Runner, also by Khaled Hosseini, and somebody on this YouTube channel was basically telling me, oh, you gotta read 1,000 Splendid Suns. I actually did try to read it a long time ago, about a decade ago, when I was pregnant with my daughter. I was too emotional at the time to read it, so I put it down. I liked it, but it was just too emotional. I couldn't think about that stuff when I was pregnant. So I got reminded by somebody who watched a video on my YouTube channel, and I thought, you know what? I gotta pick it up. It's the perfect time for me to pick it up again. And then The Signature of All Things, that is another historical fiction book. Again, somebody on this YouTube channel commented that because I really, really liked City of Girls, I had to try The Signature of All Things. This looks like something that's pretty interesting to me. It's about a family, specifically a father and then his daughter in the 1900s and the 1800s, and it's all about the quinine trade. I don't know if I'm saying that word correctly, but essentially that's an ingredient in malaria drugs. And I always like to learn about characters that are very intelligent. So just judging from the description, it seems like these two characters are very intelligent. So that looks like something that is very interesting to me. Now, another interesting historical fiction book is Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Septis. And again, I don't know if I'm saying her name correctly, so I apologize if I'm not. But this was another person on this YouTube channel recommended this book. It's about a Lithuanian girl who is with her mother and her brother sent away to a Soviet work camp, essentially. And so their story of survival. And I love stories of survival, so this really, really sounds up my alley. So I'm definitely planning on reading this book this year. And then I also would like to try Shogun. I know I also would like to try Les Miserables. These are very, very thick books, and I am also trying to read 100 books this year. So, but I don't want to do it in a way that is not reading the books that I actually want to read. So the reason why I've kind of always had this book on my radar, and there's a new TV show that's, coming out, with this book as the source material. So this has sort of been described as Game of Thrones in Japan. I mean, you gotta know, it was written in the 1970s by a British dude, so this is obviously like a British dude's perspective of Japan in the 1970s. So you gotta know that going in, but just in terms of the story, I've heard that it's just a fantastic story, and I love a good epic, right? So there you go, the most anticipated books of 2024 for me. What books on here do you think that you want to read? Comment below. What books have you read? What are some books that are on your radar? What are books that I didn't mention that you think, you know what? This is also a book that I've got to read in 2024, as well as you. Again, subscribe to this channel because I'm always giving honest book reviews, and book reviews in a way that, I'm telling you what kind of book it is. Because, we all have our own personal tastes, and just because I like it doesn't mean you're gonna like it. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean you aren't gonna like it. So don't forget to subscribe, and as always, happy reading.